Chapter 1096. You still dare to resist? Shifang said solemnly. He didn't believe that Lu Ming would dare to resist. He, Shifang's elder brother, was a strong practitioner at the first level of spirit god, and the personal bodyguard of the 8th prince. If Lu Ming dared to make a move on him, he would be courting death. Furthermore, he had learned a rather powerful martial technique from his elder brother, and his innate talent was not bad. Even if Lu Ming's cultivation was one level higher than his, he wouldn't be afraid if they really fought. Lu Ming didn't answer Shifang, and instead stood up and walked towards Shifang. 3 breaths have passed. Looks like I can only personally throw you out. Audacious, you really dare to make a move on me. Everyone, let's attack together and suppress this person. Shifang shouted angrily, and the aura on his body burst forth as he charged towards Lu Ming. Besides Shifang, the other 3 people also made their move. Their aura burst forth, and they were actually all at the 6th level of spirit embryo realm. These people were the strongest in this banner. Usually, they would follow Shifang's lead. The 4 of them working together wasn't weak, but in Lu Ming's eyes, it was no different from children playing house. Bang! Bang! Lu Ming kicked out. The instant this kick was kicked out, it turned into 4 shadows of legs. Bang! 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 All the attacks of Shifang, and the other 3 turned into bubbles and shadows under Lu Ming's legs. The soles of Lu Ming's feet directly imprinted on their faces. 4 miserable shrieks rang out as Shifang, and the other 3 flew out of the courtyard like 4 cannonballs. Their miserable shrieks rang out in the night sky and became further and further away. No one knew how far they had flown. On the field, there was still that skinny monkey-like middle-aged man who hadn't left. At this moment, his eyeballs were almost popping out and his body was trembling non-stop. His face was pale from fright. He didn't think that Lu Ming would be so daring to even hit Shifang. Most importantly, he did not expect that not only did Lu Ming dare to fight, but his combat strength was also so strong that he sent Shifang and the others flying with a single kick. Even though Lu Ming's cultivation was 1 level higher than Shifang and the other 3, Shifang had 4 people, and yet they didn't even have the slightest bit of resistance. It could be seen that Lu Ming's battle power was much stronger than normal 7th level spirit embryo realm practitioners. At this moment he looked at Lu Ming in horror. Scram! Lu Ming berated. Yes, I'll leave right now. The middle-aged man turned around and was about to leave. I told you to scram, not leave, Lu Ming said coldly. The skinny middle-aged man's face was pale. Looks like I have to do it myself. Lu Ming's gaze turned cold. No. The skinny middle-aged man was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He could only lie on the ground in humiliation and roll out of the courtyard. Then he got up and ran away. Deputy Flag Lord, I'm afraid that Shifang will not let this matter rest after offending him like this. Sun Lin was full of worry. He wasn't worried for Lu Ming. He was afraid that he would be implicated by Lu Ming. What are you afraid of? Lu Ming said casually, and returned to his room to cultivate. With a wave of his hand, numerous bottles, jars, jade boxes, and metal chests appeared in the room. There were over 100 of them, and they were all obtained from the Sacred Manor, in the Sacred Manor's secret realm. Lu Ming didn't check them previously, and now was the perfect time to check them out. These are spirit refinement pills. Lu Ming looked at those jade bottles and was elated. Those jade bottles were actually spirit refinement pills. Spirit refinement pills were refined using the spirit refinement fruit as the main ingredient. If one's spirit embryo was perfected and consumed it frequently, it could greatly increase the chances of breaking through to spirit god. If spirit god strong practitioners consumed it, they could condense their spirit god and strengthen their spiritual consciousness. There were over a dozen jade bottles here, and they were all filled with spirit refinement pills. Every jade bottle had 9 pills. There were at least a few hundred spirit refinement pills here. He had struck it rich. Following that, Lu Ming looked at other things. Many of the other things were pills, and they were all very precious pills. Most of them weren't inferior to spirit refinement pills. There were also all kinds of materials that were very precious. Lu Ming couldn't name many of them. Lu Ming kept them one by one. Finally, with a thought, a small fiery red pagoda appeared. Emperor-level spirit weapon. Once the small fiery red pagoda appeared, it trembled slightly as though it was about to leave. However, Lu Ming's vital essence spread out and enveloped the small pagoda. Emperor-level spirit weapon. If I refine it, it will definitely increase my strength. However, it won't be that easy to refine it. Furthermore, with my current cultivation, even if I refine it, I won't be able to unleash much of its power. It's better to refine it properly another day when I'm free. Thinking until here, Lu Ming put away the small pagoda again. He then took out spirit refinement pills and refined them to condense his spirit god. Time slowly passed. Tonight, there was no movement. On the second day, there was also no movement. On the second night, Lu Ming made his move. He asked Dandan to inscribe a formation to restrain his aura. His body was like a ghost as he tore through the void and headed towards the 8th Prince Xiezhen's mansion. Lu Ming planned to enter Xiezhen's mansion to see if he could find out some information about Xian Yinqing. Of course, the 8th Prince's mansion was guarded by the Imperial Dragon Guards. However, given Lu Ming's current cultivation level and the array formation that Dandan had set up to conceal his aura, the Imperial Dragon Guards could not discover him at all. The 8th Prince's mansion was very big. There were many palaces and pavilions. The area was very wide. Lu Ming spread out his spiritual sense and looked around. After a while, Lu Ming's eyes lit up. His figure moved and appeared above a palace. As his spiritual sense swept out, the situation below the palace was directly imprinted in his mind. It was clearer than seeing with his eyes. This was the wonder of spiritual sense. In a room below the palace, two figures were discussing something. One of them was Shi Fang, and the other person was over 50 years old. He had a robust figure and a rather dignified appearance. Big brother, you must take revenge for me. That new vice flag master was actually so arrogant and even dared to hit me. He clearly didn't give Big brother any face. Shi Fang complained tearfully. This robust man over 50 years old was the 8th Prince's personal guard, an expert at the first level of the domain Enlightened Spirit God realm. However, Lu Ming's current cultivation had attained the second level of the domain Enlightened Spirit God realm. How formidable was the domain Enlightened Spirit God realm that he cultivated? His spiritual sense was formidable, so how could it be noticed by his opponent? Alright, I understand. This Ming Lu is truly audacious. However, I'm at the domain Enlightened Spirit God realm and the 8th Prince's personal guard. If I were to make a move against him directly, then I would probably be criticized by others. How about this? I have a method to eliminate him. When he spoke up to hear, Shi Fang's older brother started to send a voice transmission, and Lu Ming was unable to hear the rest of it. Haha, let me see how all of you eliminate me. Lu Ming sneered, and then his figure flashed and left this place to look for the 8th Prince's residence. It wasn't long before Lu Ming finally found the 8th Prince in the depths of the estate. The 8th Prince really is Xiezhen. After not seeing him for a few years, Xiezhen has matured slightly, and his cultivation has become much stronger as well. At this moment, Xiezhen was sitting high up in a great hall. Below him, a few people were kneeling there, reporting to him about some matters. Bang! Xiezhen suddenly slapped the table heavily and shouted coldly. What? They failed again? What a bunch of trash. 8th Prince, even though 16th Princess is in the 9th hell, her natural talent is truly too formidable, and the advancement of her cultivation is too terrifying. All the people we sent were killed by her. Chapter 1097. 16th Princess? Is it Xiaoqing? Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat, and his eyes were suddenly filled with cold, killing intent. Listening to the conversation just now, Xian Yinqing was in the 9 Nether Devil domain, and Xiezhen had sent people to kill him. Damn it! At this moment, Lu Ming's killing intent was extremely strong, but in his heart he felt relieved. At least, Xian Yinqing was fine and alive. I really don't know what father is thinking. She's a different species, a bitch born from a lowly servant. Father actually didn't kill her directly or suppress her in the 9 Underworld Demon domain, but only imprisoned her in the 9 Underworld Demon domain and let her fight with the demons. She's really let off easy. Xiezhen's face was gloomy, and his voice was cold. Eighth Prince, what should we do next? One of them asked. That bitch hates me to the bone. If I let her live, I will never be able to rest easy. Xiezhen said coldly. Eighth Prince, in my opinion, you don't have to worry too much. His Majesty didn't kill her most likely, because of their father-daughter relationship. But 16th Princess is a different species, and she is a taboo of our Saint Emperor clan. Even if His Majesty doesn't kill her, he won't let her out of the 9 underworld demon domain. She will most likely spend her life in the 9 underworld demon domain. Someone below said. Even so, that bitch's talent is too high. As long as she's alive, I won't be able to rest easy. Xiezhen said with a gloomy face. Eighth Prince, should we continue to send people? Let's talk about it later. In less than 2 months, it will be the 1,000,000-year national sacrificial ceremony. During this period, Father will not continue to cultivate in seclusion. He is very concerned about the big and small matters. It's not a good time to take action. After the ceremony, we will send experts into the 9 underworld demon domain and kill her in one fell swoop. Xiezhen's eyes were gloomy. Creak. Lu Ming clenched his fists tightly, and he almost lost control of his killing intent. Who is it? But only a little bit was leaked, and it was sensed by an expert. Whoosh! Lu Ming's figure flickered, and he left the place. In the blink of an eye, he appeared 100 miles away and returned to the dormitory. He really wanted to slap Xiezhen to death, but he knew that now was not the right time. He still had to find a way to find the entrance to the 9 underworlds and save Xian Yinqing. If he killed Xiezhen now, he would definitely alert the enemy. Right now, he could only let Xiezhen live for a while longer. However, Lu Ming swore that he would kill Xiezhen sooner or later. In the following days, Lu Ming would take some time to wander around the 9 underworlds, trying his best to gather information about the 9 underworlds. Unfortunately, he got nothing. It seemed that very few people knew about the 9 underworlds. Lu Ming speculated that the demon realm of the 9 serenities was probably a realm, and the entrance to it was probably somewhere in the imperial palace. As for Lu Ming, other than going out to inquire about things, he would refine the spirit-refining pills and comprehend concepts. The soul-refining pill couldn't directly improve Lu Ming's cultivation, but it could make his spiritual spirit more and more condensed, and his spiritual sense more and more powerful. The more powerful his spiritual spirit was, the more helpful it would be for his future cultivation. 3 days later, while Lu Ming was cultivating, Shifeng came again. Lu Ming walked out of his room, looked at Shifeng indifferently and said, "What's wrong? You want to get beaten again?" Humph. Shifeng's face turned ugly. He coldly snorted and said, "I'm here to inform you that there's a mission. The 8th Prince wants to go hunting in the Bestial Mountain. We need to go together. Let's go." Okay. Lu Ming smiled and walked out in big strides. Shifeng looked at Lu Ming's back, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a cold smile. The Imperial Dragon Guards gathered and followed Xiezhen to the Bestial Mountain. The Bestial Mountain was a boundless mountain range, where countless fierce beasts lived. It was a hunting ground for the Xie family's disciples to train their cultivation. The Xie family's disciples would often come to the Bestial Mountain to hunt. In fact, they would enter the Bestial Mountain and fight with fierce beasts. Outside the Bestial Mountain, there was a huge military camp with living quarters and guards. Shifeng, you will lead the Imperial Dragon Guards and follow me into the mountain, but you don't need to protect me. You guys will hunt separately and see who can kill more fierce beasts. What do you think? Looking at the Bestial Mountain, Xiezhen was in high spirits. 8th Prince, how can we be compared to you? Shifeng revealed a flattering smile. Don't worry, there are also experts in the Imperial Dragon Guards. Try your best to compete with the Half-Prince. Those who perform well will be rewarded. Xiezhen smiled. Okay, I'll bring them along. Shifeng bowed again and again. Then let's go. Xiezhen waved his hand and flew towards the Bestial Mountain. Shifeng and the others also flew towards the Bestial Mountain. Could it be that they want to kill me in the Bestial Mountain? Lu Ming thought in his heart. He guessed that Shifeng's elder brother might attack him in the Bestial Mountain. Lu Ming's mouth curved into a cold smile. If the other party wanted to die, He wouldn't mind sending him on his way. After flying into the bestial mountain, the group dispersed. Lu Ming was bored as he flew towards the depths of the bestial mountain. The level of the beasts in the periphery of Beast Cry Mountain was very low. There were some king-level and spirit sea-level beasts. As long as Lu Ming glared at them, these beasts would disappear without a trace. After flying for half an hour, no one made a move. Still not making a move? Lu Ming muttered. He sat cross-legged on a huge rock and waited. Even after 2 hours, no one made a move against him. Seems like I guessed wrong. They won't make a move here. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He was a little surprised. Forget it, I guess Xiezhen's hunt is about to end. I'll just kill a few beasts to deal with it. Lu Ming's figure flashed and soared into the sky. Caw, caw. After a while, cries could be heard as a flock of silver eagles flew past. The moment they saw Lu Ming, over 10 of them charged towards Lu Ming. It's you guys! Lu Ming flicked his finger and long spears condensed out, shooting towards the silver eagles. Puff puff. 5 of the silver eagles were pierced by the spear light. The remaining eagles were frightened as they cried out and fled. Lu Ming didn't give chase. He swept the 5 eagles up with his true essence and flew back to the army camp. These 5 eagles were equivalent to the 8th level of Spirit Embryo Realm, which was more or less enough. In the army camp, Xiezhen and the rest had already returned. On the ground of the army camp, there were beasts of all shapes and sizes. 8th Prince is truly powerful. To actually be able to hunt down 3 fierce beasts at the 8th level of Spirit Embryo Realm and 3 fierce beasts at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm in just a few hours. 8th Prince is indeed a genius. This little one is impressed. Shifang stood in front of Xiezhen and started to flatter him. This is nothing. As long as you guys cultivate properly, you can do it too. Xiezhen said modestly. However, the complacency on his face couldn't be concealed. His cultivation was at the 6th level of Spirit Embryo Realm. To be able to hunt down 3 fierce beasts at the 8th level of Spirit Embryo Realm, and 3 at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm, in less than 3 hours in the vast Beast Cry Mountain, was already considered a pretty good achievement. N. Chapter 1098. With a casual throw, he threw the 5 huge eagles onto the ground, causing the ground to tremble slightly. These are silver eagles. All 5 of them are silver eagles, so powerful. Furthermore, all 5 of them are silver eagles at the 8th level of Spirit Embryo Realm. Deputy Flag Ming's abilities are actually so strong. To be able to hunt 5 silver eagles at the 8th level of Spirit Embryo Realm in less than 3 hours, truly astonishing. The moment Lu Ming returned, it caused a wave of exclamations as the Emperor Dragon Guards started discussing spiritedly. Even though Lu Ming had only hunted 5 demonic beasts, they were all at the 8th level of Spirit Embryo Realm. In terms of value, he had already surpassed Xiezhen. This caused Xiezhen's face to turn slightly gloomy. Besides Xiezhen, Shifang's big brother gave a cold smile. Deputy Flag Shifang, who is this? Xiezhen asked. 8th Prince, this is the new Deputy Flag. His name is Ming Lu, and his cultivation is at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm. Shifang replied. Oh, so it's the new Deputy Flag. Xiezhen glanced at Lu Ming. When he saw that Lu Ming merely cupped his fists at him casually without any hint of respect, he felt even more displeased. Xiezhen walked towards Lu Ming in large strides and said, Deputy Flag Ming's battle power is astonishing. This prince admires you. Deputy Flag Ming. This prince is itching for a fight. How about you spar with this prince? Spar. The corner of Lu Ming's mouth raised slightly. That's right, spar with me. Use your full strength, and don't hold back. Don't worry, you won't be able to hurt this prince. Bang! As Xiezhen spoke, he slowly walked forward, and his body gave off an intense golden glow as his aura flourished. He had awakened the bloodline of the 5th level of God grade, and his battle power was very strong. Normal martial artists at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm weren't his match, therefore, he was filled with confidence. At the side, the others scattered far away. Shifang and his big brother looked at each other in the eyes and sneered. Make your move. Boom. Xiezhen threw a punch towards Lu Ming. The golden fist aura whistled through heaven and earth as it attacked Lu Ming. A long spear condensed in Lu Ming's hand. Ming Lu came from Black Spear sect and used a long spear. Whoosh! The long spear trembled. The tip of the spear trembled, stirring up the wind and clouds as it pierced toward Xiezhen's fist. Bang! Xiezhen's fist light was penetrated by the long spear and collapsed. Xiezhen's gaze sharpened as a trace of killing intent flashed across his eyes. Boom! Boom! Following that, the golden light on Xiezhen's body grew even brighter as he punched out unceasingly. Boundless golden light surged and enveloped Lu Ming. Lu Ming's long spear trembled, and spear flowers bloomed in the air. Bang! Bang! Intense collisions rang out, and the fist radiance and spear radiance disappeared without a trace. Back then in Nine Dragons City, Xiezhen's cultivation was at the peak of the 7th level of the Spirit Sea realm. Now that 3 years had passed and Xiezhen was in the ancient Saint dynasty, he definitely had plenty of resources. His cultivation had risen to the 6th level of the Spirit Embryo realm, and his battle prowess was indeed not bad. Ordinary martial artists at the 8th level of the Spirit Embryo realm weren't his match, and would be killed by him. However, he was facing Lu Ming, and Lu Ming was already doing his best to suppress his own power. After dozens of moves, he still couldn't take down Lu Ming. Xiezhen's eyes flashed with killing intent. Above his head, a tall burly man in golden armor appeared. He was 100 meters tall, and held a long spear in his hand. 5 golden chakras shone brightly, making him look like a god. Xiezhen turned into a ray of light, and entered the body of the burly man in golden armor. Kill! The burly man in golden armor shouted as the golden long spear in his hand emitted a dazzling radiance, and pierced towards Lu Ming. The huge long spear brought along a terrifying whistling sound, and its power was extremely shocking. What a strong killing intent. He wants to kill me. Lu Ming's eyes flashed with a trace of cold light. If it wasn't for the fact that he was worried about alerting the enemy, Lu Ming would have killed Xiezhen right away. Boom! Lu Ming took a step forward and soared into the sky. The spear radiance condensed in his hand grew rapidly, becoming 100 meters long and 10 meters wide. He swept the spear towards the burly man in golden armor. Boom! The 2 long spears collided, and the entire barracks shook. The burly man in golden armor's body shook violently as he was blasted back repeatedly by Lu Ming's spear. Swoosh! Lu Ming charged over directly, and the huge long spear smashed down fiercely with the force of splitting a mountain. Boom! The long spear smashed heavily onto the burly man in golden armor, causing his body to shake violently and almost fall to the ground. After that, Lu Ming's spear changed into a horizontal sweep, and it smashed heavily onto the burly man in golden armor. The burly man in golden armor let out a shrill cry as his body directly collapsed and transformed back into Xiezhen's appearance. He spat out a mouthful of blood as he retreated. How audacious! You dare injure the 8th prince? You're courting death. Bang! Shifang's older brother, Zheng, took a step forward and appeared before Lu Ming. His aura at the 1st level of the domain enlightened spirit god realm erupted with a bang, and a terrifying pressure suffused the sky above the barracks. The expressions of many people changed drastically because the pressure of the domain enlightened spirit god realm was truly too strong, causing many people to tremble and break out in cold sweat. However, Lu Ming was like a cool breeze and didn't feel anything at all. He glanced casually at Zheng and said, "The 8th prince asked me to use my full strength just now, and I was merely obeying the 8th prince's orders. You still dare to quibble? The 8th prince's body is extremely precious, and he's extremely respected. You actually dared to injure him. You've offended your superior, and have no sense of seniority. You simply deserve death for your crimes. I'll cripple you right now, and lock you in prison to properly reflect on your actions." Zheng's gaze was gloomy while a trace of a complacent cold smile hung on the corners of his mouth. The nearby Shifang was even more complacent, and he glared fiercely at Lu Ming. On the other hand, Xiezhen's expression was gloomy and unsightly, yet he didn't stop Zheng. Just as Zheng had said, Lu Ming had actually dared to injure him, and he simply deserved death for his crimes. Ha ha ha! Truly laughable. The 8th prince personally gave the order for me to attack with my full strength. and I was merely obeying the order and exerting my full strength, causing me to accidentally injure the 8th prince. Yet you made a move against me because of this. Do you think the 8th prince's orders are nonsense? Would anyone listen to him in the future? Lu Ming roared with laughter, and wasn't afraid in the slightest. He finally understood now that all of this was a trap set up by Shi Zheng. Shi Zheng understood Xie Zhen very well, and knew that Xie Zhen was narrow-minded. If Lu Ming were to compete with Xie Zhen, and win or even injure Xie Zhen, then only death would await Lu Ming. That was why today's matter happened. Even if Lu Ming's kills didn't surpass Xie Zhen's, Shi Zheng would still find a way to let the 8th prince and Lu Ming exchange pointers. But today, everything went smoother than Shi Zheng had imagined. Lu Ming's kills actually surpassed Xie Zhen's, which made Xie Zhen unhappy with Lu Ming. He directly challenged Lu Ming to a battle, and there was no better result than this. Before the battle began, Xie Zhen already had the intention to kill Lu Ming. If Lu Ming's battle strength wasn't enough, and he wasn't Xie Zhen's opponent, then Xie Zhen would most likely kill him on the spot. But if Lu Ming's cultivation was stronger than Xie Zhen's, then Xie Zhen's killing intent would definitely be heavier, and Lu Ming would also be on the road to death. Therefore, whether Lu Ming won or lost, his death was certain. Bold, presumptuous, who do you think you are? You are insulting the 8th prince, and you deserve 9 exterminations. Shi Fang shouted from the side, and the killing intent in Xie Zhen's eyes was even thicker. A lowly ant actually dared to insult him. He deserved to die 10,000 times. Boom. Chapter 1099. Looks like I can't use this identity. Lu Ming's eyes turned cold. He planned to kill Shi Zheng, Shi Fang, and Xie Zhen together. Right at that moment. Haha, 8th brother, what's the matter? Why is it so lively? A loud laugh sounded. Then a roar came from the sky. It seemed like a huge army was running towards them. There were about a few hundred cavalrymen, and each of them was riding a fiery red warhorse. These warhorses were covered in fiery red scales, and there were 2 dragon horns on their heads. Flames danced all over their bodies, and they looked extraordinarily mighty. It was a dragon horse. Legend had it that it had the bloodline of a true dragon. The powerful dragon horse was not weaker than a Wyrm. The few hundred cavalrymen were all riding on dragon horses. The leader was a young man. He was tall and slender. He wore fiery red armor and fiery boots. His hair was loose, and his eyes were like lightning. His aura was powerful. 10th Prince. Many people exclaimed. Rumble. The dragon horse stepped into the air and appeared in the sky above the camp. Greetings, 10th Prince. Shi Zheng, Shi Fang, and the others hurriedly knelt in front of the 10th Prince. Their eyes were filled with reverence. 10th brother, why are you here? Xie Zhen's face was a little ugly. There was a trace of jealousy and reverence in the depths of his eyes as he looked at the young man in front of him. The 10th Prince, Xie Yan, was a peerless genius. He was one of the best amongst all the children of the current sacred emperor. And he was a second-rate genius whose name shook the central continent. His cultivation was formidable, and he'd even stepped foot into the domain spirit god realm now. His status in the ancient Saint dynasty wasn't something that Xie Zhen could compare to at all. In the imperial family, Xie Yan was second only to Xie Nianjuan. 8th brother, you can hunt, but I can't? What are you doing? It seems like you want to attack one of your subordinates. What's going on? Tell me. The 10th Prince, Xie Yan, pointed at one of the imperial dragon guards and ordered. His tone was arrogant and indisputable. The imperial dragon guard did not dare to be negligent, nor did he dare to hide anything. He recounted everything that had happened. Haha, so that's how it is. 8th brother, you are getting worse and worse. You can't even defeat a deputy flag of the 7th level of spirit embryo realm. But it's fine if you can't defeat him. But you said you would kill him after you lost. If this matter were to spread out, wouldn't our Saint Emperor clan become a joke? Xie Yan said indifferently. Haha, 10th brother, you've misunderstood. I didn't mean to kill him. Just now bodyguard Shi Zheng saw that I was injured and was worried. That's why he stood in front of me. Everything is a misunderstanding. Xie Zhen's expression fluctuated for a while before he revealed an ugly smile. Really? So it was all a misunderstanding. However, This vice flag commander's combat strength is not bad. He is only one level higher than 8th brother, but he can easily crush 8th brother. He is a talent. Xie smiled. Xie clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. He was simply furious. Taking a deep breath, he calmed himself down and revealed a smile. That's right. This vice flag commander Ming Lu's combat strength is indeed not bad. Therefore, I plan to transfer him to the law enforcement army. Coincidentally, the million-year national sacrifice is about to begin. When that time comes, the sacred city will definitely be in chaos. The law enforcement army is in need of manpower. When he said that, Shifang and Shi Zheng's eyes lit up and revealed a cold smile. As for the others, they looked at Lu Ming with pity. Lu Ming's heart moved. What was the meaning of these gazes? Haha, he is 8th brother's man. You can arrange him however you want. Let's go. Xie smiled and led the 400 cavalrymen towards Beast's Cry Mountain. After Xie left, Xie expression turned gloomy. He swept a cold glance at Lu Ming and said, Vice Flag Commander Ming, go back and wait. The order will be given soon. You shall go to the law enforcement army and be a commander. With your combat strength, it's about time. When Xie said that, the expressions of the others became even weirder. They looked at Lu Ming with even more pity. And you will be transferred to the law enforcement army with him. Then, Xie pointed at Sun Lin. Plop! Sun Lin's expression changed drastically. Then he knelt down with a thud and kowtowed as he screamed. No, 8th Prince, I beg you. No, don't transfer me to the law enforcement army. I only live with him. I don't know him. Humph, you want to disobey this prince's order? Xie eyes turned cold. Sun Lin's face turned pale, and he stood there in a daze. Let's go. Xie soared into the air and returned to his residence. The others quickly followed. Sigh, Ming Lu, I'm going to die because of you. Sun Lin let out a long sigh with a bitter expression. What's going on? Why don't you want to join the law enforcement army? The law enforcement army, from the name, it should have a lot of power. Lu Ming asked curiously. Many sects had their own law enforcement hall. The law enforcement hall had a lot of power. They enforced the law on behalf of the sect, and were respected by everyone. Why did Sun Lin seem to be afraid of joining the law enforcement army? When the others heard that Xie wanted to transfer Lu Ming to the law enforcement army, they all looked at him with pity. Sigh, you might not know this, but the law enforcement army does have a lot of power. However, that power is useless now. Sun Lin sighed and continued to explain. The law enforcement army is the law enforcement organization of the ancient Saint dynasty. They are responsible for enforcing the law in the holy city and maintaining the security of the holy city. No matter who you are, no matter which force you are from, the law enforcement army will be dispatched to enforce the law if you commit a crime in the holy city. Lu Ming nodded his head. Isn't that a lot of power? If it was 30,000 years ago, when the ancient Saint dynasty ruled the world, everyone would be afraid of the law enforcement army. They had great power, and anyone who committed a crime would be suppressed or even killed on the spot. At that time, everyone wanted to join the law enforcement army. As long as you joined the law enforcement army, everyone would be afraid of you. But now the ancient Saint dynasty is weak, and the emperors are divided. Each of them is powerful, and the position of the law enforcement army is very awkward. For example, if the disciples of the major forces commit a crime, should the law enforcement army take action or not? If they don't take action, the law enforcement army represents the reputation of the ancient Saint dynasty. In that case, the imperial family might blame them, because it would be a disgrace to the imperial family. However, if they take action, the experts of the major forces would put pressure on the imperial family. Under the pressure, the imperial family would usually hand over the law enforcement army to appease the other party's anger. In that case, who would be willing to go to the law enforcement army? Sun Lin explained. Lu Ming had a sudden realization. He finally understood. The main reason was that the ancient Saint dynasty was weak, and they did not dare to offend the major forces. If that was the case, the power of the law enforcement army would be rendered useless. If they didn't do anything, they would be throwing the face of the ancient Saint dynasty. If they did something, The people from the major factions would be able to pressure the law enforcement army. The law enforcement army would then become the scapegoat. No matter what they did, they would be jumping into a fire pit. It was no wonder that when the others heard that Lu Ming would be transferred to the law enforcement army, they all reacted that way. Sigh, once he is transferred to the law enforcement army, it's all over. Moreover, the 1,000,000-year national ceremony is coming. When the time comes, the holy city will gather, and all the major forces of the divine wilderness continent will gather. It will definitely be chaotic. What should the law enforcement army do? Only death awaits. Chapter 1100. 3 days later, the transfer order was officially issued. Lu Ming was transferred to the Enforcer Army as the commander, leading a team of 100 people. Sun Lin would follow him. Lu Ming took the transfer order and set off with Sun Lin. Lu Ming didn't mind. To him, the Enforcer Army was better as it gave him more freedom. He could walk around the holy city as he pleased. That way, he would be able to gather more information. Sun Lin, on the other hand, was listless. He had a gloomy expression on his face. Soon, the two of them arrived at the Enforcer Army's encampment, the Enforcer Hall. There were many Enforcer Halls in the Holy City. A team of 100 people was led by a commander. They were stationed in the Enforcer Hall, and were responsible for enforcing the law in a certain area of the Holy City. Lu Ming was the commander of this team of enforcers. He was mainly in charge of an area in the northeast of the Holy City. When Lu Ming walked in, he only saw a few figures sitting listlessly in the Enforcer Hall. He didn't see anyone else. After seeing Lu Ming's group, those people only glanced at Lu Ming casually and continued to sit listlessly. Lu Ming frowned and said, "Just the few of you, where are the others?" One of them looked at Lu Ming and said, "Who are you? You dare to barge into the Enforcer Hall without permission. Do you know that this is a serious crime?" "I'm the new commander. Let me ask you, where are the others?" Lu Ming took out a token and shouted coldly, "The new commander?" Those people's eyes suddenly lit up, flickering with greed and burning flames. They seemed to be suddenly energized, and stood up one after another. Then one of them shouted, "A new commander is here. Brothers, come out, we have money to spend again." His voice spread far and wide. Just as his voice fell, the sound of breaking wind rang out. Figures rushed out from various rooms in the Enforcer Hall. There were at least 80 to 90 people. As soon as these people appeared, they stared at Lu Ming and Sun Lin with burning eyes. It was as if they were burly men who had been thirsty for decades and saw a peerlessly enchanting beauty. "Haha, another unlucky bastard has arrived, and it's even a commander. You've come at the right time. Take out all your origin stones and treasures, and share them with us brothers." A burly man who looked like a gorilla stepped out. His muscles bulged as he stared at Lu Ming with a ferocious gaze. "Hee, you're actually just a martial arts practitioner at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm, and you're transferred here to be a commander. I really don't know which big shot you've offended. However, no matter who you've offended, since you're here, hand over the origin stones and treasures." A gray-haired old man in his 60s sneered. "Haha, once we get the origin stones, let's go eat and drink to our heart's content, shall we? That's for sure." "Motherfucker, I haven't enjoyed it for a long time." The others were also in a hubbub, talking one after another, looking at Lu Ming, as if they were looking at a piece of fat meat. Sun Lin's face was pale. Lu Ming was dumbfounded. This was the law enforcement army? This was the law enforcement hall? Lu Ming almost thought that he had come to a bandit's lair. These people actually wanted to rob him. After careful observation, this was undoubtedly the law enforcement hall. "You guys want to rob me?" Lu Ming's face revealed an indescribable smile. "If you want to interpret it that way, that's fine too. Hurry up, otherwise my fist is going to itch." The burly man who looked like a gorilla stared at Lu Ming unkindly. The smile on Lu Ming's face became even wider. Sweeping his gaze, he said, "Since that's the case, all right, I'll rob you now. Hand over all your storage rings." What did you say?" Once Lu Ming's words came out, the entire place quietened down. Everyone looked at Lu Ming dumbfounded. After a while, everyone burst into laughter. "Haha, did I hear wrongly? This fellow at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm actually wants to rob us? Who does he think he is? Does he really think he's a commander? Isn't he the same as us? An unlucky fellow who offended someone he shouldn't have offended. What a joke. Bang! The burly man with the gorilla took a step forward, and a violent aura burst out from his body. With a wave of his hand, he grabbed at Lu Ming. This person's cultivation was at the consummate level of spirit embryo realm. Among this group of people, he was at the peak. Let's see what abilities you have. The burly man with the gorilla revealed a ferocious expression. Lu Ming's gaze turned cold. He stretched out a hand and grabbed the wrist of the burly man with lightning speed. His vital essence burst forth as he grabbed the burly man and flung him violently. Boom! The burly man with the gorilla was like a sandbag as he crashed heavily onto the ground, causing the entire law enforcement hall to tremble violently. If it wasn't for the powerful formation inscribed in the law enforcement hall, it would probably have exploded. The burly man with the gorilla screamed miserably as he crashed onto the ground. His cultivation and vital essence were incomparably weak in the hands of Lu Ming. They were completely scattered by Lu Ming. At this moment, his entire body seemed to have fallen apart. He didn't have any strength left as he laid on the ground, howling in grief. Everyone suddenly became silent as they looked at Lu Ming in shock. The burly man with the cultivation of the consummate level of spirit embryo realm was actually beaten to the point where he couldn't resist at all. How was this possible? Brothers, let's attack together. This person's battle prowess is profound, so he must have a lot of benefits on him. Let's attack. The white-haired elder shouted loudly. 80 to 90 law enforcers also shouted and rushed towards Lu Ming like a swarm of bees. Bang! Lu Ming took a step forward and rushed over like a flowing light. He slapped out. Pack! Pack! In the law enforcement hall, rapid slapping sounds could be heard, as well as howls and screams of agony, which were all mixed together. In less than a minute, 80 to 90 law enforcers were lying all over the law enforcement hall. They were lying on the ground and howling in grief. One side of their faces was bulging up, making them look incomparably miserable. Sun Lin looked at this scene dumbfoundedly. His mouth was open so wide that he could swallow a duck egg. Was Lu Ming's cultivation at the 7th level of spirit embryo realm? Wasn't his battle prowess a little too strong? In this team of law enforcers, there were 5 to 6 people with consummate spirit embryos. The rest of them were experts at least at the 4th level of spirit embryo realm and above. However, in less than a minute, they were all beaten down by Lu Ming. They were as weak as babies. This was too terrifying. He felt that his head couldn't quite turn around. You dare to attack me? You're courting death. Lu Ming shouted coldly. Now, Lu Ming had the appearance of a burly man with a full beard. When he glared, he looked quite imposing. Grabbing the air with his palm, his vital essence burst forth. The storage rings on the fingers of these law enforcers were all sucked over by Lu Ming. If they wanted to rob him, they had to be prepared to be robbed by him. First, Lu Ming picked up the storage ring of the burly chimpanzee and scanned it with his spiritual consciousness. He was dumbfounded. Aren't you a little too poor? Lu Ming stared at the burly chimpanzee and was completely speechless. In the storage ring of the burly chimpanzee, other than a few spirit crystals, there was almost nothing else. Origin stones, no. Good spirit weapons, no. Not to mention any precious medicinal pills or materials. It was completely empty. There was nothing at all. This was a storage ring with a consummate spirit embryo after all. How could it be so poor? Next, Lu Ming looked at the storage rings of other people. Many of them were even poorer than the burly chimpanzee. Chapter 1101. Lu Ming scanned dozens of storage rings and found that they were all similar. The contents inside were miserable and didn't look like the storage rings of martial artists above the 4th level of spirit embryo realm at all. Looking at Lu Ming's dumbfounded expression, the chimpanzee and the others were embarrassed. With a wave of his hand, all the storage rings flew back to the chimpanzee and the others. Get up, don't play dead. Lu Ming looked around and said coldly. Lu Ming didn't hit them hard just now. He only scattered their vital essence temporarily, so it wasn't a big deal. After all, Lu Ming was the commander of these people. He couldn't kill them as soon as he arrived. The chimpanzee and the others got up from the ground one by one. "Commander, your battle power is profound. I'm really impressed." As soon as he got up, the chimpanzee showed a simple and honest smile, which was completely different from the ferocious look just now. Yes, Commander, your cultivation is unparalleled. You got rid of us in just a few moves. It's the first time I've seen something like this in all my years." The white-haired elder also flattered. "Commander is invincible. Commander is mighty." The other members of the law enforcement army also flattered. Lu Ming's eyelids kept twitching. He was quite speechless. What kind of people were these? They wanted to rob him just now, but now they changed their attitude so quickly. "Why are you so poor? You don't even have a piece of origin stone in your storage rings?" Lu Ming asked curiously. "Sigh, we are the law enforcement army. It's so hard. Commander, it's like this." Everyone started to explain to Lu Ming. After listening, Lu Ming fell into deep thought. The life of the law enforcement army was even worse than what Sun Lin said. The law enforcement army had to enforce the law in the sacred city and protect the reputation of the ancient Saint dynasty. However, the ancient Saint dynasty had declined. Although it was still an overlord force, or even the strongest one, it was just an overlord force. It no longer had the power to dominate the world. Therefore, when it did things, it had to be scrupulous and had to build a good relationship with other forces. Therefore, the law enforcement army didn't dare to arrest or punish the people of the big forces when they committed crimes. However, they had to protect the reputation of the royal family. What could they do? Therefore, most of the time, the law enforcement army had to pay out of their own pockets to give gifts to the disciples of the big forces and those who had committed crimes. They would ask them to do a good deed and apologize in public. In this way, the law enforcement army would naturally protect the reputation of the royal family. The criminals would also admit their mistakes, and the matter would be resolved. However, they had to fork out their own money. Over time, it would be strange if the law enforcement army was not poor. It was no wonder that they wanted to rob Lu Ming as soon as they saw that he was new. Lu Ming was speechless. The law enforcement army was too cowardly. The culprit was fine, but they had to give the culprit benefits. This was simply unheard of. The law enforcement army is supposed to enforce the law under the heavens and represent the ancient sage dynasty in enforcing the law. However, it's a pity that the ancient sage dynasty no longer has the power to do so. In fact, the law enforcement army could have been removed long ago. However, the imperial family has kept it for the sake of their dignity. The white-haired old man sighed. Lu Ming finally knew why Xiezhen transferred him to the law enforcement army and made him a commander. The million-year national ceremony was getting closer and closer. People from all the big forces would gather. It was an eventful time. If something went wrong, Lu Ming would offend someone, and he wouldn't even know how he died. Moreover, the responsibility of a commander would naturally be greater. "Xiezhen, if you want to play, let's play." Lu Ming's lips curled into a smile. He waved his hand, and a storage ring flew towards the chimpanzee man. "There are 10,000 origin stones here. Use it to buy some good wine and delicacies. I'll treat everyone to a good meal. If there's more, each of you can buy a spiritual weapon." These people were simply too poor, to the point that they had even sold their own spirit weapons. 10,000 origin stones? The chimpanzee man took the ring and was stunned at first. Then he was overjoyed and said, "Thank you, Commander." The others were also overjoyed. They thanked Lu Ming and then went to buy good wine, delicacies, and spiritual weapons. The wine and delicacies that martial artists ate were different from those of ordinary people. They were all from powerful fierce beasts and demon beasts. The wine was also spiritual wine, which was very expensive. Half a day later, the chimpanzee man and others bought a lot of good wine and delicacies. The 80 to 90 people were divided into several tables and ate to their heart's content. They hadn't eaten and drank to their heart's content for a long time. At the moment, they were quite grateful to Lu Ming. Everyone ate and drank while chatting. Through chatting, Lu Ming learned that these people had offended big shots and were transferred here. They had families and friends in the sacred city. They couldn't escape, so they could only suffer in the law enforcement army. Everyone ate and drank for a few hours. Not good. Someone destroyed a shop on North Street and killed the shopkeeper. He's still there now. Suddenly, a law enforcement army soldier rushed in to report the news. What? Who did it? Trouble, something happened again. The chimpanzee man and others' faces changed drastically. They were usually most afraid of accidents, because once something happened, it would be easy to deal with some unknown people. However, if it was a big shot, it would be difficult. It's the young master of the Huang family, Huang Ke. The messenger said. What? The Huang family is a family with many spiritual immortals. What should we do? The chimpanzee man and others' faces changed drastically. They couldn't offend any force with the spiritual immortal. Otherwise, the spiritual immortals of the other party could directly find their superiors and put pressure on them. Let's go and have a look. Lu Ming picked up a glass of wine, drank it all and strode out. You will go together. The chimpanzee man picked a dozen people and followed Lu Ming out of the law enforcement hall. Their law enforcement hall was in the northeast of the sacred city. It was very close to North Street. They arrived in a short while. On the way, Lu Ming also knew what was going on. Huang Ke, the young master of the Huang family, took a fancy to a treasure in a shop, but there was no origin stone. He said that he owed it first, and wanted to take the treasure first. Those who knew Huang Ke knew that he had never paid back anything he owed. The shopkeeper naturally didn't agree, so Huang Ke killed the shopkeeper and destroyed the shop. He even wanted to kill the shopkeeper's family. As soon as he arrived, he heard an arrogant voice. Damn it! I gave you face but you didn't take it. I said that you owed it first. It's not like you won't pay it back. Why don't you agree? You're courting death. Who can you blame? An arrogant voice sounded. Get out of the way. If you don't get out of the way, I'll kill you too. A deep voice sounded. It must have been Huang Ke's servant. Get out of the way, get out of the way. The law enforcement army is on duty. Get out of the way. The chimpanzee man roared. The crowd made way, and Lu Ming strode over. A white-haired old man was lying on the ground, no longer breathing. Chapter 1102. That youth was Huang Ke. Behind Huang Ke, there was even a burly man following behind her. At this moment, Huang Ke also saw Lu Ming and the rest. However, not only was he not afraid, he even sneered. What's going on? Lu Ming walked over and asked with a frown. So it's people from the law enforcement army. This person offended me and was killed by me. You guys can collect his corpse. Huang Ke had his hands behind his back as he casually glanced at Lu Ming and said indifferently, Killed by you? This person was running a shop in the sacred city and should be protected by the law enforcement army. Why did you kill him? Follow us to the law enforcement hall and give us an explanation. Lu Ming said coldly. What did you say? You want to capture me and bring me to the law enforcement hall? Huang Ke seemed to have heard a very funny joke and almost laughed out loud. He looked at Lu Ming in disbelief. The others at the side were the same. The law enforcement hall dared to capture Huang Ke? Huang family was considered quite a power in the sacred city. Now that the law enforcement army existed in name only, would they really dare to capture Huang Ke? Nonsense, Tai Xing, capture him. Lu Ming shouted loudly. Tai Xing was the name of the burly chimpanzee. The burly chimpanzee revealed a difficult expression. Commander, this Huang Ke is not to be offended. Tai Xing whispered in Lu Ming's ear. If you guys don't make a move, I'll do it myself. Lu Ming's gaze turned cold as he stepped forward. You dare? Huang Ke shouted loudly. Why wouldn't I dare? Lu Ming sneered. A mere law enforcement army, you're courting death. Kill him. Huang Ke waved his hand and the burly man behind him stepped forward. A violent aura burst forth, as the aura of the 8th level of spirit embryo realm burst forth. Die! The burly man shouted angrily with cold killing intent. He unsheathed his battle knife and slashed towards Lu Ming's neck. Want to kill me? Die! Lu Ming took a step forward and struck out with his palm. Space rumbled, and the terrifying power instantly broke through all of the burly man's defenses. A palm slapped the burly man's chest, and a large hole directly appeared in his chest. He screamed, and with a look of disbelief, his life was cut off. Even at the moment of his death, He still could not believe that the trash of the law enforcement army had become so domineering. You dare. Huang Ke was so scared that her face turned pale. She trembled all over and looked at Lu Ming in disbelief. If you want to kill me, you have to be killed by me. Since you asked him to kill me, I'll cripple you first. Lu Ming's eyes flashed with killing intent. No, don't. Huang Ke was extremely terrified. Whoosh! Lu Ming flicked his finger, and a spear light shot out, crippling Huang Ke's cultivation. Ah, you crippled my cultivation. I want you to die a horrible death, a horrible death. Huang Ke screamed miserably. At the side, the others were incomparably shocked. This law enforcement army was completely different from before. They were actually so ruthless and decisive. However, there were also many people who secretly clapped their hands and cheered. This Huang Ke had relied on her family's power to commit all kinds of evil. She finally got her retribution. However, this law enforcement army was going to be miserable later. The Huang family would not let this matter rest. Behind Lu Ming, Tai Xing and the others widened their eyes, not knowing what to do. Although they also felt very good doing this, their entire bodies felt comfortable. But now they felt comfortable. But what about the consequences? If Huang Ke was crippled, the Huang family would probably go crazy. Lu Ming sucked Huang Ke and the burly man's storage rings over and handed them to the two women at the side. One old and one young, obviously the shopkeeper's family. The two of them cried bitterly with a helpless face. Take these 2 storage rings and leave the sacred city. Go live somewhere else. Lu Ming handed over the storage rings to the two and said, Thank you, sir. The two of them thanked him repeatedly and then quickly left the city. Tai Xing, bring this trash back to the law enforcement hall. Lu Ming ordered, then turned around and walked towards the law enforcement hall. Tai Xing and the others looked at each other. In the end, they gritted their teeth and carried Huang Ke back to the law enforcement hall. Along the way, Huang Ke's crying attracted many people's attention. There's a good show to watch. The Huang family will definitely go crazy and kill their way to the law enforcement hall. They probably won't kill the law enforcement army directly, but they will put pressure on the law enforcement army and then kill their way to the law enforcement hall. Let's go and take a look. Let's go and take a look. Along the way, a large group of people followed behind Lu Ming and the others to the law enforcement hall. Not long after, Lu Ming and the others returned to the law enforcement hall. When the remaining law enforcement army saw this scene and heard what had happened, they were all pale with fright. It's over. How are we going to deal with the other party's experts when they come knocking on our door? Forget it, we can't hide. Let's go all out. But I feel pretty good in my heart. That's true. Haha. The other members of the law enforcement hall discussed softly. Lu Ming's face was calm. He crossed his arms and closed his eyes to rest, waiting quietly. The sky around the law enforcement hall was filled with people. Some were waiting quietly while some were gloating. Time passed slowly. 2 hours later. The Huang family is here. Someone shouted. Whoosh! At this moment, Lu Ming opened his eyes and looked at the sky. There were a total of 3 people in the sky. The 2 old men were dressed like Huang Ke. They should be the experts of the Huang family. The other middle-aged man was actually wearing the uniform of the law enforcement hall. It's the commander-in-chief. Tai Xing's face changed and whispered in Lu Ming's ear. The commander-in-chief he was referring to was the commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army. He was in charge of all the existing law enforcement army in the holy city. The commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army's face was as black as a pot. His gaze fell on Lu Ming and he scolded. Ming Lu, why aren't you releasing young Master Huang Ke? The commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army was extremely displeased. Especially when he looked at Lu Ming. He was even more displeased. How could Lu Ming not be aware of the current situation of the law enforcement army? He had accidentally apologized to them, and even dared to kill the guards of the Huang family and cripple Huang Ke's cultivation. It would be strange if the Huang family didn't fly into a rage. Look, their domain enlightened spirit god expert had directly come looking for him and pressured him. Release him? Haha, commander-in-chief. This person killed the shopkeeper of a store on the street. That shopkeeper had to be protected by the ancient Saint dynasty to do business in the holy city. Otherwise, who would dare to do business in the holy city in the future? I'm acting impartially. Why should I release him? Lu Ming sneered as he replied. The other members of the law enforcement hall behind him broke out in cold sweat for Lu Ming. The commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army was a domain-enlightened spirit god expert. Lu Ming actually dared to speak to a domain-enlightened spirit god expert like that? Sure enough, Lu Ming's words caused the commander-in-chief of the law enforcement hall's expression to become even more gloomy. However, he was unable to find the words to refute Lu Ming. Because Lu Ming was right. Lu Ming was carrying out the duties of the law enforcement hall. As the commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army, how could he refute Lu Ming? Haha, Commander-in-Chief Chin. Looks like your subordinate doesn't listen to you at all. Since it's like that, then allow me to personally cripple this person's cultivation and bring him back to the Huang family to be dealt with. Chapter 1103. First Level of Spirit God. Lu Ming's lips curled into a cold smile. The elder from Huang family was at the first level of Spirit God, and the other elder beside him had an even weaker cultivation. He was only at the perfected spirit embryo. However, this person had a powerful aura that was far from ordinary perfected spirit embryos. Lu Ming guessed that this person had awakened his god-level bloodline, but hadn't broken through to the spirit god realm. He was considered an old monster, and his battle power was much stronger than ordinary perfected spirit embryos. Bang! Lu Ming stepped on Huang Ke's face, making him scream like a pig being slaughtered. How dare you say you want to cripple me, the commander of the law enforcement army, in the disciplinary hall. You are simply disgraceful and deserve to die. Lu Ming shouted and glared at him. With his face full of beard, he looked righteous. He exerted force with his feet and rubbed Huang Ke's face against the ground. Ah, old ancestor, save me! Huang Ke screamed miserably. How dare you, evil creature! You are courting death. The elder with the perfected spirit embryo shouted, and took a step forward with a violent aura. He formed a huge palm and pressed down on Lu Ming. Not good, it's an old monster with a perfected spirit embryo. The expression of Tai Xing and the rest changed drastically. Tai Xing also had a perfected spirit embryo, but his battle power was far inferior to that of a perfected spirit embryo, who had awakened a god-level bloodline. However, Lu Ming's expression was still calm. He clenched his hand into a claw and clawed upwards. With a poof, the old man's palm collapsed instantly. Lu Ming's claw, which was condensed by his vital essence, continued to grab the old man at an incredible speed. In an instant, the old man was caught in his hand. Break! The elder's expression changed drastically, and his god-level bloodline appeared. He executed bloodline fusion and unleashed a violent attack, wanting to break apart Lu Ming's vital essence claw. However, it was a pity that it didn't budge. Come down! Lu Ming shouted softly. He pulled his claws downwards and directly pulled the old man's body down from the air, smashing him onto the ground ruthlessly. Boom! The earth quaked and the old man screamed miserably. His protective Zhen Yuan had been shattered by Lu Ming. His bones crackled and popped, and it was unknown how many of them had been broken. He lay on the ground, screaming miserably like a dying dog. The surrounding onlookers, including the other members of the law enforcement hall, were all dumbfounded. They looked at this scene in disbelief. The onlookers in particular swallowed their saliva like crazy. This disciplinary hall commander was too awesome. Firstly, his battle prowess had exceeded everyone's expectations. An old monster with a perfect spirit embryo was pulled down from the sky in one move and smashed into the ground half dead. Such battle prowess could be said to be astonishing. Secondly, this commander was too audacious. Not only had he crippled Huang Ke, he'd even bashed a senior of the Huang clan to the point he was on the verge of death. Next, he would definitely have to face the rage of a domain-enlightened spirit god. Bastard, you're courting death. Sure enough, the spiritual god expert from the Huang clan was furious. He let out a loud roar as a terrifying aura erupted from him. A pressure that was as deep as the ocean suffused the entire area. Many people's expressions changed drastically as they retreated madly. The pressure formed by a spiritual god expert's attack was too strong and absolutely terrifying. Die! The spiritual god of the Huang clan shouted and pointed his finger. Everywhere his finger passed, yellow rays of light burst forth. The space distorted like ripples of water, and was finally torn apart. Whoosh! A terrifying finger force was aimed at the center of Lu Ming's eyebrows. This awesome commander is finished. Such a thought flashed through everyone's mind. Boom! Just when such a thought flashed through everyone's mind, Lu Ming blasted a fist towards the sky. A fist aura soared into the sky and collided with the finger force. With a loud boom, the finger force and the fist aura disappeared at the same time. What? He blocked the attack of the domain enlightened spirit god? Waves of cries of disbelief came from the surroundings. Lu Ming's battle prowess had once again exceeded everyone's expectations. He had actually blocked the attack of the domain enlightened spirit god. The eyes of the commander of the law enforcement hall flickered, and he was incomparably astonished. According to what he knew, Ming Lu had been transferred to the law enforcement army because he had offended the 8th prince. According to the information he had received, this person's battle prowess was only slightly stronger than the 8th prince. When he had sparred with the 8th prince, he had recklessly injured the 8th prince. Therefore, no matter how strong his battle prowess was, it was still limited. He had never expected that he could actually block the attack of the domain enlightened spirit god. It seems that this person has been hiding his strength. The commander of the law enforcement army thought to himself. A murderous intent flashed through Lu Ming's eyes. His gaze was like two resplendent spear auras that pierced towards the Huang clan's elder. He said indifferently, "It seems that you want to be like him." The him that Lu Ming was talking about was the elder with the perfected spirit embryo. At this moment, the Huang clan's spiritual god's heart couldn't help but tighten. At this moment, he actually felt a terrifying pressure from Lu Ming. It was as if he was facing a terrifying ferocious beast that could tear him into pieces once it went berserk. This kind of feeling made him panic in his heart. "What do you want?" The Huang clan's spiritual god asked with an unsightly expression. "Apologize and admit your mistake in front of everyone." Lu Ming said. "Don't even think about it. Don't go overboard. If you let him go now, I won't pursue the matter." The Huang clan's spiritual god's face turned ugly. However, by saying so, he was already taking a step back. Lu Ming sneered and said, "This person killed the shopkeeper of the holy city for no reason. I am the commander of the law enforcement army, and I am here to enforce the law on behalf of the Saint Emperor. Your Huang clan is so audacious that you actually dared to kill your way into the law enforcement hall. Are you looking down on the ancient Saint dynasty and the imperial Xie clan? Are you trying to overturn the heavens? And you, as the commander of the law enforcement hall, it's fine if you don't enforce the law impartially, but you actually help the other party to bully the law enforcement hall. It seems that you also don't put the imperial family in your eyes." Lu Ming's every word struck the heart of the Huang clan's spiritual god and the commander of the law enforcement hall. Their expressions changed drastically and became abnormally ugly. Lu Ming was pulling the wool over their eyes and putting a big label on them. However, this label was too heavy for them to bear. Today there were so many people here. If Lu Ming's words reached the ears of the imperial family, and even the Saint Emperor, they would definitely have to bear the consequences. Although the law enforcement hall existed in name only now, and no one really cared about it, it was still the law enforcement hall in essence. Before the law enforcement army was withdrawn, it had the same meaning as it did 30,000 years ago. It had the power to enforce the law. In fact, other law enforcement hall people could also put a label on others, because once this matter was blown out of proportion, the imperial family would definitely intervene. However, the premise was that they had to have strength. For example, if Lu Ming was not strong enough, he would have been slapped to death by the Huang clan's expert. There would be no chance to put a label on him. However, it was different now, since Lu Ming had already spoken out and put a label on them. If they continued to act, it would really be like what Lu Ming said. They didn't put the Imperial Xie clan in their eyes. After that, the Imperial Xie clan would definitely take action. Otherwise, where would their face go? Damn it! The Huang clan's spiritual god and the commander of the law enforcement army gritted their teeth. But there was nothing they could do. Okay, This is my Huang clan's fault. I apologize. In the future, I will definitely warn the Huang clan's disciples to follow the rules of the law enforcement army. The Huang clan's spiritual god was helpless. In the end, he could only apologize. Then, he looked at Huang Ku and asked her to apologize. Chapter 1104. Scram! Lu Ming picked up Huang Ku and threw him to the Huang family's spirit god, as if he was throwing trash. The Huang family's spirit god's face was very cold. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the elder with a perfect spirit embryo before leaving without looking back. Today, the Huang family had lost all face. The commander of the law enforcement army also snorted and left by stepping into the air. The surrounding onlookers looked at each other in disbelief. They had originally thought that with the Huang family's large-scale attack, the commander would most likely be dead. Who would have thought that even though the Huang family's experts had come, they would return with their faces covered in dirt? As for the commander, he was completely unharmed. This was out of everyone's expectations. This commander of the law enforcement army is really awesome. He's really awesome. He's the most awesome commander of the law enforcement army I've ever seen. Everyone was discussing spiritedly. The people of the law enforcement army were also tongue-tied. They didn't expect the final result to be like this. However, it felt great. The eyes of the 80 to 90 people of the law enforcement army lit up. They felt extremely comfortable. As for Lu Ming, they were full of admiration. Commander is mighty, Tai Xing roared. All right, cut the crap and get to work. Lu Ming waved his hand and returned to his room. Everyone dispersed. But the matter of the law enforcement army, having a powerful commander, spread out like a whirlwind. It gave everyone something to talk about while they were cultivating. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ming had been in the law enforcement army for half a month. During this half a month, other than cultivating, Lu Ming was strolling around the sacred city. Of course, he wasn't really strolling around. Instead, he was loitering outside the imperial palace to see if he could find a chance to sneak in. In the end, he gave up helplessly. There were too many terrifying existences in the imperial palace. He had carefully sensed and found that there were countless existences in the imperial palace that could easily kill him. There were even some incomparably terrifying auras that were like the aura of a supreme being. They were definitely supreme beings. Lu Ming had sensed no less than 10 of such auras. And this was what Lu Ming had sensed. If he hadn't sensed anything, then there was definitely something else. Although the ancient holy court had weakened, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The ancient holy court was still the most powerful force in the central continent, and its power was unfathomable. This was to be expected as well. If they weren't strong, they would have long been destroyed by the other overlord forces. After all, there were many overlord forces who were eyeing them covetously. In the past half a month, more and more people had gathered in the holy city as the ancient sage dynasty's 1,000,000-year state ceremony was getting closer. However, due to the incident with the Huang family last time, some small forces would not be too presumptuous. In the areas under Lu Ming's jurisdiction, nothing major happened. On this day, a shocking piece of news spread throughout the holy city. The sage emperor intended to choose a husband for one of the princesses during the 1,000,000-year national sacrifice, and he wanted to choose one of the heroes of the younger generation. As soon as this news came out, it was like an earthquake that shook the entire holy city. Countless people were shocked. The current sage emperor had a total of 16 children. Among them, there were 13 princes and only 3 princesses. However, the 13 princes were completely suppressed by the 3 princesses. That was because 2 of the 3 princesses' names shook the world. Their magnificence was unmatched, and they were simply too outstanding. Xian Yinjuan was one of the top 5 youths in the central continent. At the same time, she was also one of the top 5 beauties of the central continent. Her beauty was unparalleled and unparalleled. There was another princess, Xian Yinlin. She was also one of the top 5 beauties of the central continent. However, her martial arts talent was slightly inferior to Xian Yinjuan's. Nevertheless, she was still a second-grade genius, and was on par with Sandalwood Fairy and Jing Kongling. These two princesses were so outstanding that countless people were envious of them. It was said that there was another princess. She was the youngest of all the princes and princesses. She was also peerlessly beautiful. Her appearance and temperament were not at all inferior to the other two princesses. Even her martial talent was incomparably shocking. However, not many people had seen her before. That was because that princess was an anomaly in the imperial Xie family. Anomaly was a taboo word in the imperial Xie family. That was because the imperial Xie family was weakened because of an anomaly. Which princess was the sage emperor going to choose a husband for? Everyone was extremely curious. However, no matter which princess it was, many young geniuses from the major factions were tempted. Then, the major factions sent people to investigate and verify the authenticity of the news. Lu Ming's heart trembled when he heard the news. Who was the sage emperor going to choose a husband for a princess? Lu Ming was very worried. He was afraid that it was Xian Yanqing. 3 days later, an even more shocking piece of news was released. The current sage emperor personally ordered someone to spread the news. It was true that he was going to choose a husband for a princess. The princess was Xian Yanlin. Moreover, it was going to be a competition between young geniuses on the day of the Million-Year National Sacrificial Ceremony. The person who won first place would become Xian Yanlin's husband, and would also be able to enter the sage emperor's ancient palace to cultivate. The person who won second and third place would be able to make a request to the sage emperor. The sage emperor would try his best to fulfill the request, and would also be able to enter the sage emperor's ancient palace to cultivate. The person who won 4th to 10th place would be able to enter the sage emperor's ancient palace to cultivate. When the news was released, it caused a huge earthquake in the sacred city. Countless people were shocked. At the same time, the news spread to the central continent, and even the surrounding territories at the speed of a tornado. Countless young geniuses were shocked. Their eyes lit up. Some of the geniuses were not interested in the person who won first place, or being able to marry a princess. Instead, they were interested in a condition from the sage emperor, which was to enter the sage emperor's ancient palace to cultivate. The sage emperor was an emperor. There was no need to mention the value of a condition from him. The sage emperor's ancient palace was a sacred place for cultivation. Legend had it that the ancient dynasty's sage emperors had comprehended the palace. If one could comprehend it, it would be very useful for breaking through to the emperor realm in the future. The ancient dynasty's Xie family had been passed down for millions of years. They had produced many emperors and had never stopped. That was why they had always been strong. Some people said that it had something to do with the sage emperor's ancient palace. This made the geniuses who wanted to become emperors extremely excited. After confirming the news, they all rushed to the sacred city. When Lu Ming heard it, he heaved a sigh of relief, because the princess was not Xian Yanqing. However, at the same time, Lu Ming was also very excited. What he was excited about was not Xian Yanlin, nor was it about entering the sage emperor's ancient palace. It was about a condition from the sage emperor. If he could get second or third place, he would be able to ask the sage emperor to let Xian Yanqing go. At the thought of this, Lu Ming decided that he would participate in this competition. This piece of news caused the ancient sacred dynasty to lose its peace. It became the top topic of discussion. People talked about it every day, and it didn't die down for a long time. Many people were secretly guessing why the sage emperor would do this. However, it was not difficult for people with foresight to guess that the imperial Xie family wanted to use this method to increase the strength of the imperial family. The person who could get first place and marry Princess Xian Yanlin would definitely be a genius from an overlord force. This way, through marriage, the imperial family would increase the strength of the imperial family. Chapter 1105. Amidst the hustle and bustle, time passed day by day. The holy city became even more lively, and more people came. However, Lu Ming's daily routine remained the same. Apart from cultivating, he would be strolling around the sacred city with his men. This mansion is so strange. It's covered in dust, and there's an inscription formation on the outside to seal it off. In the northeast of the sacred city, Lu Ming brought his men for a stroll, and arrived at a huge mansion. The mansion was ancient and majestic, occupying a large area. However, no one was living in it as it was sealed off by a formation. It was rare to see such a mansion in the sacred city. "Sir, lower your voice. This mansion is a taboo," Sun Lin said softly with a heavy expression. He seemed to be afraid of it. "Taboo? I'm curious. Tell me about it," Lu Ming asked curiously. "This?" Sun Lin's face was filled with hesitation as he squeaked. "Tell me." Lu Ming's face sank. "All right, Commander. I'll tell you through voice transmission. This mansion is the mansion of the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor, Xiaowan," Sun Lin said to Lu Ming through voice transmission. The Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor Xiaowan? The Emperor of Chaos Sky, who caused the internal strife of the ancient Saint Dynasty 30,000 years ago, and caused the ancient Saint Dynasty's strength to plummet? Lu Ming was shocked. "That's right. It's the mansion of the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor," Sun Lin said. "Oh, Sun Lin, you seem to know a lot about the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor. Do you know why he betrayed the Imperial Xia family?" Lu Ming asked. "This, Lord Commander, I've accidentally read about it in an ancient book. Legend has it that the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor, Xiaowan, is an anomaly in the Xia family. The Imperial Xia family has a noble bloodline, and the bloodline that they awaken is pure and holy. However, there's a small chance that someone will awaken a bloodline that's completely different from the others. It's an extremely dark bloodline. This kind of person is called an anomaly by the Imperial Xia family, and will be looked down upon and mocked. When the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor was young, he grew up under all kinds of ridicule and humiliation. Therefore, he hated the Imperial Xia family. However, the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor was terrifyingly talented. The more bloodlines he awakened, the more terrifying his talent became. He was simply unparalleled in the world. Therefore, the Imperial Xia family attached great importance to him and entrusted him with important tasks. Later on, the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor broke through to the Emperor realm. His combat strength was terrifying, and he was able to suppress the other emperors. At that time, the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor finally erupted. He led his subordinates and started a rebellion. They fought against the Imperial Xia family. Although the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor was suppressed in the end, the ancient Saint Dynasty suffered a great loss in that battle. Countless spirit gods and sovereigns were killed. Even the emperors were killed. Since then, the ancient Saint Dynasty's strength was greatly weakened. The ancient Saint Dynasty's strength has reached a new height. Sun Lin told Lu Ming everything that he had read. Lu Ming fell into deep thought. The Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor's experience was similar to Xian Yanqing's. The bloodline that he awakened was called an anomaly by the Imperial Xia family. It's just a bloodline. It's ridiculous that they treated it like that. The Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor Xiaowan was extremely talented. If the others did not mock and humiliate him when he was young, why would he rebel when he became stronger? If he didn't rebel, he wouldn't be where he was today. The ancient Saint Dynasty's Xia family would only become more prosperous and powerful. I heard that the current 16th princess also awakened an anomaly bloodline. Sigh, it's so pitiful. The anomaly bloodline has always been looked down upon by the imperial family. Moreover, after the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor, the anomaly bloodline ended up in a worse state. Before the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor appeared, the imperial family would still nurture the anomaly bloodline of the imperial family if they showed great talent, just like the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor. However, after the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor appeared, the imperial family suppressed any anomaly bloodline directly. The stronger one's talent was, the more they suppressed them. It's simply a taboo, because they are afraid that another anomaly like the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor will appear. Sun Lin continued. Crack. Lu Ming could not help but clench his fists tightly. No matter what, he had to save Xian Yanqing. No matter how difficult it was, he had to go through it. Then, Lu Ming left without asking any questions. Time passed quickly. Soon, there was only half a month left until the Million-Year State ceremony. After this period of cultivation, Lu Ming's cultivation had also improved and reached the mid-second level of the spirit god realm. It's too slow. It's really too slow to increase my cultivation by absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Lu Ming sighed. However, there was nothing he could do. He didn't have many origin stones with him now. The amount of origin stones needed to increase one's cultivation in the spirit god realm was simply terrifying. However, the water intent of heaven and earth had broken through and reached the 4th level of the initial stage. Now, only the earth intent had not broken through to the 4th level of the initial stage. On this day, Lu Ming had just ended his cultivation and was about to go out for a walk when someone came to report that something had happened. Someone had killed someone on the street, and the battle was still ongoing. Who is it? Lu Ming asked. I heard that it's a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect. Tai Xing replied with an ugly expression. The Celestial Martial Sword sect was an overlord force. Furthermore, it was an extremely powerful overlord force. What should they do now? They knew that something was going to happen, as the various overlord forces gathered in the holy city. What should we do? Of course, we have to do it impartially, Lu Ming said. Impartially? Commander, the other party is the Sky Martial Sword sect. Tai Xing cried out worriedly. So what if it's the Sky Martial Sword sect? Don't forget that this is the holy city, and not the Sky Martial Sword sect. All of you follow me, Lu Ming shouted coldly, and walked out with large strides. The others had no choice but to follow. They flew in the air and soon arrived at the scene of the incident. It was outside a restaurant. At this moment, the restaurant was surrounded by people. Lu Ming appeared in the air and looked down. On the street, 2 people were lying on the ground with blood flowing everywhere. Their throats were slit by a sword, and they were no longer breathing. On the other side of the 2 corpses, the battle was still ongoing. 3 Celestial Martial Sword sect disciples in white robes were currently attacking 3 people. One of them was an old man, and the other 2 were young men and women. However, the 3 of them were no match for the 3 Sky Martial Sword sect disciples. The 3 Sky Martial Sword sect disciples were all experts at the 5th level of Spirit Embryo Realm. They were very young, and belonged to the younger generation. To have such a cultivation at such a young age, they were clearly the top prodigies of the Sky Martial Sword sect. As for the old man and the young man, the old man's cultivation was at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm. However, the young man and woman's cultivation were only at the 1st or 2nd level of Spirit Embryo Realm. The difference was too great. Although the old man's cultivation was high, the 3 Sky Martial Sword sect disciples were all top prodigies. It was normal for them to fight above their level. They completely suppressed the old man and made him unable to retaliate. Hee, you guys are courting death. How dare you talk about the Sky Martial Sword sect behind our backs? One of the Sky Martial Sword sect disciples sneered. The Sky Martial Sword sect is too overbearing. You don't even allow others to talk? In the World Academy's Saint Manor secret realm, Wu Chengkong and the rest were killed by Lu Shaoqing. This is the truth, and everyone knows it. Are you guys going to kill everyone in the world? Chapter 1106. Lu Ming's eyes flickered. Through the simple conversation between the 2 parties, it wasn't hard to guess what was going on. The young lady and the others must be talking about what happened at the World Academy and the Sacred Mansion secret ground. In the Sacred Mansion secret ground, the 2 strongest sky prides of the previous generation of the Sky Martial Sword sect were killed by Lu Ming. The 2 strongest sky prides of the current generation were also killed by Lu Ming. They only managed to survive because of the life talisman. This matter had already spread far and wide. Lu Shaoqing's name had even shaken the entire Middle Continent. The young lady and the other disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect must have heard about this matter. Given the tough style of the Sky Martial Sword sect, they naturally took action. Shut up. How dare you mention this matter again? Who knows what despicable means Lu Shaoqing used to harm our senior brothers of the Sky Martial Sword sect? How dare you talk nonsense here? You're courting death. Kill. The disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect bellowed as they attacked even more violently. Stop. The enforcers are here. Lu Ming stepped down from the sky and shouted. The 3 disciples of the Tianwu Sword sect turned to look at Lu Ming. Their eyes were filled with contempt. This is the Sky Martial Sword sect's business. Unrelated people scram. One of the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect bellowed, in an extremely domineering manner. The enforcers were nothing in their eyes. It's that awesome commander of the enforcers. Could it be that he dares to touch the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect? Impossible. No matter how awesome he is, he might be able to deal with a small faction like the Huang family. But this is the Sky Martial Sword sect, one of the top overlord factions. Unless he's tired of living, he wouldn't dare to touch the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect. That's right. Didn't you see those disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect ignoring him? At this moment, many people in the crowd recognized Lu Ming. However, no one thought that he would dare to touch the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect. A puny enforcers dared to touch the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect? Wasn't that just courting death? Kill. The 3 disciples of Celestial Martial Sword sect ignored Lu Ming, and their attacks became more and more violent. Their sword chi was like rainbows, and the elder of the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm was completely at a disadvantage. He couldn't withstand the attacks at all, and his chest was slashed by a sword light. A deep sword wound appeared, and he was almost cleaved into 2 halves. Young miss, young master, leave quickly. That elder roared loudly, risking his life to erupt with power, wishing for that young man and woman to quickly leave. Leave? Today, none of you will be able to leave. How dare you spread rumors about my Celestial Martial Sword faction? All of you deserve death. A disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect shouted coldly. With a flash of his body, he bypassed the old man like a beam of sword light, and charged towards the young woman. No, that elder roared loudly, but he couldn't even protect himself, so how could he help? The young girl's face was snow white. She was only at the 1st level of Spirit Embryo Realm, while her opponent was at the 5th level. Furthermore, he was a prodigy with strong battle prowess. She couldn't defend against him at all. Die. The disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect revealed a malevolent look in his eyes as his sword flashed like lightning, slashing down at the young woman. However, when the sword light was halfway through, it stopped. That was because someone had grabbed onto the disciple's wrist, preventing him from slashing down. The person who had grabbed onto his wrist was naturally Lu Ming. At the crucial moment, Lu Ming appeared in front of the young woman and blocked the disciple's sword. When he saw that it was Lu Ming, the disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect, had a shocking murderous intent in his eyes. He shouted, "How dare you, a mere enforcer, interfere with my attack? I'll kill you as well." His vital essence burst forth as the sword chi on the disciple's body whistled. His other hand was like a sword, piercing towards Lu Ming's throat. Bam! Lu Ming immediately kicked out, landing a kick on the disciple's stomach. The disciple let out a blood-curdling scream as his body flew dozens of meters away, landing heavily on the ground. You dare to retaliate?" The disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect cried out in disbelief. Lu Ming actually dared to retaliate? He was a disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect. Idiot! Lu Ming said indifferently. This person wanted to kill him earlier. Wasn't it normal for him to retaliate? Could it be that this disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect was so superior that no one dared to retaliate when he killed someone? His head must have been kicked by a donkey. At this moment, the other 2 disciples of the Celestial Martial Sword sect stopped their attacks as they looked at Lu Ming in shock. A mere enforcer, an ant, actually dared to hit a disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect? They were still in a daze. The onlookers were also dumbfounded. It took a while for someone to react. Oh my god, this awesome commander is really awesome. He even dares to hit a disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect. Yeah, this is really beyond my expectations. He's way too gutsy. Gutsy but brainless. How is he going to deal with the aftermath? Lu Ming's actions caused a commotion as everyone was shocked. Previously, no one thought that Lu Ming would dare to make a move. But the truth was beyond their expectations. Kid, you're courting death. At this moment, the other 2 disciples of the Celestial Martial Sword sect finally reacted. One of them hollered as he became one with his sword. Turning into a sharp sword light, he charged towards Lu Ming. wanting to kill Lu Ming with a single slash. Bam! But what welcomed him was another kick from Lu Ming. This kick was the same as the previous one. It landed on the disciple's stomach. It was fast, accurate, and ruthless. The celestial martial sword sect disciple cried out in pain as he flew far away. He landed beside the previous disciple and fell flat on his face. Both of their postures were exactly the same. The crowd gasped. Lu Ming was truly audacious. If Lu Ming accidentally hit the disciple of the celestial martial sword sect because he was in a hurry to save someone, then this time, it was completely intentional. He wasn't afraid of the disciples of the celestial martial sword sect at all. Amongst the crowd, the enforcers who came with Lu Ming were all sweating profusely. They sighed in their hearts. They had messed up big time. The remaining disciple of the celestial martial sword sect was shocked. Lu Ming's combat strength was too horrifying. With just a casual move, he had taken care of a fellow disciple who was about the same level as him. This made him not dare to make a move. Kid, how dare you hit the genius of our celestial martial sword sect? You're dead. Not only you, but the forces behind you and your family are all dead. They're all going to be wiped out. Just you wait. A lowly enforcer. Just you wait. The remaining disciple of the celestial martial sword sect shouted malevolently before turning around to leave. Did I allow you to leave? Lu Ming said indifferently. The disciple froze. Looking at Lu Ming, he asked, You, what do you mean by that? He was about to leave on his own accord. And Lu Ming still wanted to pursue the matter? Nonsense. You want to leave after killing someone in my territory? Who do you think I am? What do you think the enforcers are? Lu Ming shouted and stepped forward. You, don't come over. I'm telling you, you're dead. The remaining disciple of the celestial martial sword sect shouted. But when he saw Lu Ming approaching, he was so frightened that he couldn't even speak properly. Phew. Chapter 1107. This kick was as fast as lightning. By the time the other party came to his senses, Lu Ming had already kicked him in the stomach. He screamed and flew out, landing in a row with the previous two people. He was sprawled on the ground, looking like a dog eating feces. Ah, bastard, you're dead meat. The elders of my celestial martial sword faction, as well as senior brothers Wu Chengkong and Wu Tsang, are all here. They're not far from here. The news will spread out soon. A disciple of Tianwu sword sect yelled and threatened Lu Ming. Bam! Lu Ming strode over and stomped on the disciple's face, causing his face to rub against the ground. Wu Chengkong, Wu Tsang? They're just two pieces of trash who were killed by Lu Shaoqing in the Sacred Mansion's secret realm. If it weren't for the life talisman, they would have died long ago. I'll wait here for these two pieces of trash. If Lu Shaoqing can kill them, so can I. Lu Ming lowered his head and looked down at the three disciples of Tianwu sword sect. His cold voice echoed throughout the area. Everyone was stunned. This awesome commander is too awesome. He's going to wait here for Wu Chengkong and Wu Tsang? Is he going to learn from Lu Shaoqing and kill supreme talents? Lu Shaoqing was a peerless supreme talent who was comparable to the five giants. How could a mere law enforcer compare to him? However, they couldn't help but admire Lu Ming's courage. Lu Ming was going to step on the disciple's face and wait here. The other two disciples of the Tianwu sword sect lay on the ground, not daring to say a word. They were afraid that they would be trampled on. However, in their hearts they hated Lu Ming to the core. They could not wait to tear him into pieces. Tai Xing and the others were drenched in cold sweat. Tai Xing walked quietly to Lu Ming's side and said, Commander, isn't this too much? What if the experts of Tianwu sword sect arrive? What's there to be afraid of? We're from the Law Enforcement Hall. We're here to enforce the law on behalf of the Saint Emperor. What's there to be afraid of? Lu Ming said casually. Tai Xing and the others were speechless. They could only bite the bullet and wait with Lu Ming. News of what happened here spread like a whirlwind. What? Was there such a thing? There's actually such a powerful commander? Let's go take a look. When many people heard the news, they didn't believe it at first. Then, they were extremely curious and wanted to go and take a look. Many disciples and geniuses from the overlord factions were astonished when they heard the news. Over the years, the royal clan's power had been declining steadily. The law enforcement army was practically useless. The geniuses and disciples of the transcendent powers could do whatever they wanted in the Saint City. How would the law enforcement army dare to control them? They would rather curry favor with them. Now there was actually someone who dared to beat up the Sky Martial Sword faction's genius. This piqued the curiosity of many, and they all rushed over to watch. In 8th Prince Xiezhen's residence, Xiezhen was drinking tea in the courtyard when Shizheng rushed in. "Guard Shi, why are you in such a hurry?" Xiezhen asked. "8th Prince, it's about Ming Lu." Shizheng Dao. "Oh, is that blind guy dead yet?" "Even if he didn't die, he wouldn't be able to survive, right?" "Humph. How dare you injure this prince? What a blind dog." Xiezhen drank a mouthful of tea and said slowly, "He didn't die. That guy is really audacious. Huang Ke from the Huang family killed someone some time ago. He actually crippled Huang Ke's cultivation." Shizheng replied, Crippled Huang Ke's cultivation? Didn't the Huang family come and kill Ming Lu?" Xiezhen asked curiously. "Of course they did. A spiritual god expert and an old monster with a perfected spirit embryo went. They even called the commander of the law enforcement army." Shizheng said, "Oh, if that's the case, then Ming Lu isn't dead yet?" Xiezhen was curious. In his opinion, Ming Lu should have been slapped to death by the spiritual god of the Huang family. No, that Ming Lu's combat strength is amazing. He actually blocked the attack of the spiritual god, and even used the carelessness of the Saint Emperor. Shizheng gave a brief account of what had happened the last time. "Damn it! This Ming Lu actually has such a cultivation, and even used the name of the royal clan. Humph! He's lucky to have escaped this calamity." After listening, Xiezhen's face turned ugly. He was very unhappy. Then his expression changed and he said, "You said you rushed here because of Ming Lu. What happened to him?" "Hee. This time he's dead for sure. He actually beat up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect." Shizheng told him about how Lu Ming beat up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect, and how he was waiting for the experts of the Sky Martial Sword sect. "This Ming Lu is really audacious. Haha. Let's see how he's going to die this time. Let's go. We can't miss such a good show. Let's go and take a look." Xiezhen stood up excitedly and rushed over with Shizheng. In the northeast of the Saint City, in front of the restaurant, Lu Ming stepped on the face of a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect and waited there quietly. In the sky, more and more people came and filled the sky. "Wucang is here!" A loud shout shook the entire place. In one direction, many people opened up a path. In the sky over there, two figures were walking in the air. One of them was the second-grade sky pride of the Sky Martial Sword sect, Wucang. Behind Wucang was Shifang. This stunned Lu Ming for a moment. Then, he realized that Shifang must have reported to Wucang. In fact, that was the case. When Shifang heard that Lu Ming had beaten up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect, he knew that his chance had come. He had always wanted to befriend a sky pride like Wucang, but he never had the chance. Now the chance had come. Without hesitation, he rushed to Wucang's residence and passed the news to him. As expected, Wucang was enraged and rushed over. Wucang's footsteps were slow. Every step he took caused the sky to buzz and tremble. It seemed like it couldn't withstand Wucang's anger. Wucang's eyes were filled with killing intent. He said in a cold voice, "Trash of the law enforcement hall. How dare you beat up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect? Good. Very good. Just you? Where's Wu Qinkong? I heard that you and your fellow disciples were beaten up badly by Lu Shaoqing. Today, I'll learn from Lu Shaoqing and beat all of you up. Unfortunately, it's just you." Lu Ming glanced at Wucang casually and said indifferently. The crowd was stunned. Isn't this commander a little too arrogant? Wucang alone isn't enough. He wants to beat up Wu Qinkong and Wucang like Lu Shaoqing? Who does he think he is? Wucang was a second-grade sky pride. He was famous in the world and had reached the spiritual god realm. A sky pride like him couldn't be compared to an ordinary spiritual god. Lu Ming was able to block a blow from the Huang clan's spiritual god. Does he really think he can compete with such a sky pride? He's too naive. Many people shook their heads. They thought that this awesome commander was dead meat today. Tai Xing and the others had ugly expressions. They didn't dare to say a word. They just stood behind Lu Ming with gritted teeth. They had no choice. In such a situation, they could only hold on. Haha, let's see how you're going to beat me up then. Wuxia laughed in anger and took a step forward. Boom! Heaven and earth shook violently. Sword chi surged into the sky and stirred up the wind and clouds. A terrifying light was emitted from Wuxia's body. Every ray of light was like a sword chi. Chapter 1108. Those who had never seen a second-grade genius in action were shocked. Is this the strength of a second-grade genius? His aura was too terrifying. Many people retreated frantically, afraid that they would be affected by Wuxia's sword. When such a genius attacked, his aura alone could kill an expert of the same level. This commander is dead for sure. Seeing Wuxia's aura, many people sighed. Wuxia was so strong. What could Lu Ming use to block him? Die! Wuxia shouted coldly. His palm was like a sword, bursting with light, forming a dazzling sword light that slashed towards Lu Ming. As the sword light slashed through, even the space was torn apart, revealing a dark and terrifying space crack. This is not good. Dodge! Behind Lu Ming, Tai Xing and the rest were terrified. In the face of such a powerful sword, they felt that it was impossible to resist. Only death awaited them. They screamed and wanted to retreat, but they realized that their bodies were shrouded by a terrifying sword aura, making it hard for them to move. It's over, it's over. We're finally killed by this unreliable commander. Tai Xing and the rest had this thought flashing through their minds. But at this moment, they saw a long spear condensing in Lu Ming's hand. As the long spear shook, it buzzed and even the space trembled. At this moment, Tai Xing and the rest realized that the sword aura that shrouded them had disappeared, and they had regained their freedom. Whoosh! Then, they saw Lu Ming holding the long spear and sweeping it out. This spear was like a long spear sweeping across the water. Wherever the long spear passed, ripples would appear in the space, and these ripples would all gather on the long spear. Bang! The long spear and the sword light collided. There was only a slight sound, and Wuxia's sword light was destroyed. He blocked it. Tai Xing and the rest were stunned. The surrounding onlookers were also stunned. This badass commander could actually block Wuxia's move? Since when was a commander of the law enforcement army so powerful? A bunch of questions flashed through the minds of the crowd. Wuxia was also stunned. Obviously, he didn't expect that a lowly commander of the law enforcement army could block his attack. Although he didn't use his full strength in that attack, it still made him feel embarrassed. Who was he? He was a famous second-class genius in the central continent, second only to the 5 young giants. How could he not take down a commander of the law enforcement army with one move? This made him burst out with even stronger killing intent. A blazing killing intent. Good, very good. So you do have some ability. But today, your fate has already been decided. Wuxia coldly shouted as the sword qi around his body became even hotter. His Zhen Yuan continued to pour out before finally transforming into a sword qi that was several times more powerful than before, slashing towards Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming still casually swept out with a spear, dispersing Wuxia's sword energy, turning it into nothingness. Show me what you've got, or else it's not enough. Lu Ming cast a sidelong glance at Wuxia. Damn it! Wuxia shouted angrily as he unsheathed his sword. A shocking sword light shone, as if it was going to split the heaven and earth apart. Kill! Wuxia held the battle sword in his hand. His power was incomparably terrifying. When the battle sword slashed out, the space shattered. Heavens, he's too strong. Wuxia is angry. This is too terrifying. Retreat, retreat. Many people cried out as they frantically retreated again. Whoosh! Lu Ming held the spear in one hand, as the long spear in his hand slashed out violently. It became 1,000 meters long, and swept out in a barbaric manner. With a bang, Wuxia's sword qi shattered once again. However, this time, Lu Ming did not stop. The terrifying giant spear continued to press towards Wuxia. Impossible! Wuxia shouted in disbelief. He had already used a divine-level martial skill in the previous move, but it was still defeated by Lu Ming's spear. How was this possible? He could not believe it. What was most unbearable for him was that Lu Ming's spear swept towards him. giving him a strong sense of crisis. How could a mere enforcer, an ant-like thing, have such a powerful expert? Erupt, erupt! Wuxia roared in his heart as he unleashed his divine-level bloodline. He executed the bloodline fusion and turned it into a battle sword with shocking sword chi. Suppress! Lu Ming stepped into the air. The long spear contained the power of the suppressing hell skill. The spear changed its momentum and smashed towards Wuxia. Clang! The long spear clashed with the battle sword that Wuxia had transformed into. The attack from the battle sword was instantly defeated. The battle sword trembled violently before exploding with a bang. The battle sword exploded, revealing Wuxia's original body. His face was pale as he spat out large mouthfuls of blood. His eyes were filled with disbelief. In the surroundings, everyone looked at the scene in disbelief. Wuxia was defeated. Wuxia was actually defeated by Lu Ming's spear. How was this possible? What was going on? Was this still the commander of the Enforcer army? How could he be so powerful? Those who thought that Lu Ming was dead for sure almost bit off their tongues and stared with their eyes wide open. It was simply too unbelievable. As for Shifang, he thought that he was dreaming. Wasn't Ming Lu only at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm? Wasn't he just a disciple of Black Spear Sect? How could he be so strong? His body started to tremble slightly due to disbelief. As for Tai Xing and the rest, they were completely petrified. The 3 disciples of Celestial Martial Sword Sect were also petrified as they stared blankly at the sky. How weak! I thought a second-class prodigy of Celestial Martial Sword Sect would be strong. Lu Ming curled his lips, his face full of disdain. Wuxia was infuriated. He was so angry that he wanted to roar at the sky. In the past, he was terrifyingly talented and powerful. In Celestial Martial Sword Sect, only Wu Qinkong could suppress him. Even in the Battle of Destiny, he didn't lose too badly. But recently, he was killed by Lu Shaoqing in the secret realm of the Saint Mansion. If it weren't for the life talisman, he probably wouldn't have survived. Now he was defeated by a mere commander of the Enforcer army. This was a great humiliation. From now on his name, Wuxia, would become a laughingstock. How could he not be angry and resentful? If he knew that Lu Shaoqing and the commander of the Enforcer army in front of him were the same person, how would he feel? Bastard, just you wait. You're dead for sure. Wuxia roared and retreated quickly, planning to retreat first. Since you're here, where do you want to go? Why don't you lie down with your junior brothers? Lu Ming stepped out. His body was like a flash of light. He dashed to Wuxia in a few moves. How dare you? Wuxia roared. Lu Ming wanted to suppress him and make him lie there with the other disciples of Celestial Martial Sword Sect? How dare he? He was the second-class prodigy of Celestial Martial Sword Sect. He was completely different from the other prodigies. Suppress! Lu Ming's eyes were cold. He stepped in the air, and the power of the 9 dragons, sky-stomping steps was unleashed. He took 7 consecutive steps toward Wuxia. Bam! 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 Chapter 1109. Bam! Lu Ming's body fell and stepped on Wuxia's body once again. Wuxia shrieked in pain as his cultivation was completely sealed by Lu Ming. He could not muster any strength at all. The crowd gasped. The disciplinary army commander was too ruthless. He even dared to suppress Wuxia. How overbearing. Lu Ming grabbed Wuxia and threw him to the side of the other 3 disciples of the Tianwu Sword Sect to lie on the ground. The 3 Sky Martial Sword Sect disciples looked at each other before looking at Wuxia with an interesting expression. Initially, they had been suppressed by Lu Ming and were lying on the ground like dogs eating feces. They felt extremely humiliated. However, at the sight of Wuxia lying on the ground, they suddenly felt much better. Even a genius like Wuxia was suppressed and forced to lie there. It made sense that they were forced to lie there as well. Ah! Wuxia howled like a wild beast. He was furious, especially when he saw the strange looks from the crowd. He wanted to kill himself. Of course, it was just a thought. How could he bear to die? He had a bright future ahead of him. Where are you going? At this moment, Lu Ming looked at a person in the air not far away. That person was Shifang. When he saw that even Wuxia was suppressed, he almost peed in his pants. Just as he was about to sneak away, Lu Ming saw him. He revealed a smile that was uglier than crying and said, "Ming Lu, what? What are you trying to do?" "What am I trying to do? As an Imperial Dragon Guard, you actually brought people from the Sky Martial Sword sect to deal with the disciplinary hall. You colluded with the enemy. What do you think I'm trying to do?" Lu Ming sneered. His true energy erupted, and he grabbed at Shifang. Shifang turned pale with fright. He wanted to retreat, but he felt a terrifying force enveloping him. He couldn't move at all. In the next moment, a force pulled him down, and he fell heavily to the ground. "Ah no!" he screamed. Bam! Lu Ming lifted his leg and stepped on Shifang's dantian. Shifang's entire body arched like a big prawn. He then let out a heart-wrenching scream. "My cultivation base! My cultivation base! You've crippled my cultivation base!" Shifang let out a roar of despair. The spirit embryo in his dantian had been crushed by Lu Ming. "Crippling your cultivation is your punishment. Scram!" After saying that, he kicked out. Shifang was kicked away like a rubber ball. He turned into a black dot and disappeared in the air. It was unknown how far he flew. As for whether he would fall to his death, Lu Ming was too lazy to think about it. "Alright, the harvest is not bad. What are you guys waiting for? Bring them all back to the law enforcement hall." Lu Ming looked at Tai Xing and the others and said, Bring him back to the law enforcement hall?" Tai Xing and the others looked at each other with unsightly expressions. "Nonsense. Only by bringing them back will we have the capital to negotiate with them. Do you think that the Celestial Martial Sword faction will let this matter rest just because you let them go? Don't just stand there. Bring them away." With a wave of his hand, Lu Ming grabbed Wuxia and flew toward the Hall of Justice. Helpless, Tai Xing and the others could only lead the other 3 disciples of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction to follow Lu Ming. There's going to be a show to watch. This matter will definitely provoke the seniors of the Celestial Martial Sword faction. Let's go and take a look. This commander is indeed impressive. However, with the seniors of the Celestial Martial Sword faction taking action, let's see how he's going to deal with this. Let's go and take a look. There were tens of thousands of people in the crowd. They followed Lu Ming from afar and headed toward the law enforcement hall. Moreover, the number of people was increasing. Not long after Lu Ming and the others left, Xiezhen and Shizheng rushed over. When they heard that Wuxia was suppressed by Lu Ming, both of them were dumbfounded and in disbelief. They were confident that Lu Ming would be beaten half to death by Wuxia, or even killed on the spot. However, the outcome was the complete opposite of what they expected. "Let's go to the law enforcement hall." Xiezhen brought Shizheng and rushed to the law enforcement hall. When Lu Ming brought Wuxia and the others back to the law enforcement hall, the remaining members of the law enforcement army were stunned. Following which, their eyes were filled with fear. Lu Ming had actually suppressed a disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword faction, and even Wuxia. This was going to break the heavens. If the seniors of the Celestial Martial Sword faction were to go berserk, how would they deal with it? "We are the law enforcement army. We enforce the law on behalf of the Saint Emperor. What are you afraid of? Follow my instructions and get to work," Lu Ming shouted. He then gave Tai Xing and the others some instructions. As for Lu Ming, he threw Wuxia and the others on the ground and lined them up in a row. He took out a wooden armchair and sat there, closing his eyes to rest. The onlookers looked at each other. This commander of the law enforcement army was really bold. At this moment, he was sitting leisurely on the armchair with his eyes closed. The sky above the law enforcement hall was filled with people. As time passed, more and more people arrived. This was different from the previous incident against the Huang family. This time, it was against the Celestial Martial Sword faction. Moreover, the suppression of a second-grade genius had caused a huge commotion. Many people were shocked and rushed over to watch. Xiezhen and Shizheng had arrived. There were even second-grade geniuses from other overlords. The crowd saw Jing Kongling, Kong Xian and Sandalwood Fairy. There were also Sanguinarum, Yin Bupo, and the others. There were at least 7 or 8 of them. These geniuses were shocked when they saw Lu Ming sitting on the armchair with his eyes closed. Wuxia was as famous as them. However, this ordinary-looking law enforcement army commander was so powerful that he could suppress Wuxia. This shocked them. The royal family of the ancient Saint dynasty indeed has a strong foundation. To think that they would have such a powerful law enforcement army commander. Some of them thought to themselves. Suddenly, a terrifying pressure descended from the sky. The crowd felt as though there was a huge mountain pressing down on them. There was a terrifying roar from the aura. Under the pressure, the crowd opened up a path for three old men to step through the air with gloomy faces. The three old men were dressed in white robes and carried ancient swords on their backs. There seemed to be endless sword chi roaring around their bodies. Just their aura alone was shocking. They're here. The crowd was shocked. The elders of the celestial martial sword faction were here. At this moment, Lu Ming opened his eyes and looked at the sky. The three experts of the celestial martial sword faction stepped through the air and stopped above the law enforcement hall. Bastard. You're finished. You're dead. Haha. You're dead. When Wuxia saw the arrival of the three old men, he yelled out in joy. Bam! Lu Ming stood up and stepped on Wuxia's face, causing his face to fall heavily onto the ground. Wuxia took a mouthful of mud and struggled wildly. He was so frustrated that he was about to explode. The crowd was shocked as well. Lu Ming dared to do such a thing in the face of three elders of the celestial martial sword faction. He was simply lawless. The gazes of the three elders were as sharp as swords, landing on Lu Ming. How dare you? One of the old men bellowed. His eyes were extremely sinister as he scolded. Kid, do you know who you have taken down? Aren't they just a few trash from the celestial martial sword faction? Why? Do you think that you're proud of raising a few trash? Lu Ming curled his lips and said casually. Chapter 11:10. How presumptuous! How bold! You deserve to die. The three old men of the Tianwu sword sect yelled with cold gazes. Their bodies were engulfed in powerful sword intents. Haha, you asked for it. That despicable son of a bitch is dead for sure. The eighth Prince Xiejin let out a hollow laugh. Kid, you should commit suicide. Everyone in the law enforcement hall should commit suicide as well. Then, I'll forget about this matter. Otherwise, not only you, but your families and the forces behind you will not be able to escape punishment. The old man who spoke first continued to speak. His tone was filled with an air of superiority and indisputability. His gaze swept across Tai Xing and the others, causing them to feel a chill down their spines. Ha ha ha. Lu Ming burst out laughing all of a sudden, and stomped his foot on Wuxia's face, causing him to cry out in agony. His lips curled upward as he stared coldly at the old men of the Tianwu sword sect and said, Punish? Let this matter rest. What a joke. What right do you have to punish us? We are the ones who should be punished. The disciples of the Tianwu sword sect have killed someone in the sacred city for no reason. We, the disciplinary army, are enforcing the law on behalf of the sacred emperor. However, the Tianwu sword sect dares to attack the disciplinary hall openly. Are you looking down on the royal family? Are you looking down on the sacred emperor? Do you really think there's no one in the royal family? The old men of the Tianwu sword sect were enraged after hearing the words. They stared at Wuxia, who was still under Lu Ming's foot with an unpleasant expression. Lu Ming had used the royal family and the sacred emperor to pressure them. Even if they did not care about the royal family and the sacred emperor, they could not say it out loud. After all, the ancient sage dynasty was still the ruler of the world. Furthermore, they were currently in the sacred city, which was the core territory of the ancient sage dynasty. No matter how arrogant the Tianwu sword sect was, they would still be intimidated. Kid, what will it take for you to let them go? The old man who had spoken first said coldly, as he glanced at Wuxia and the others. Wuxia was a second-grade genius who had a chance to become a martial emperor. They could not afford to lose him. Thus they decided to save Wuxia first. Let them go. Sure, but since they have committed a crime they should be punished. How about this? You can pay the ransom. 500,000 primordial stones for the three trashes. Wuxia, 2 million ores it is. Lu Ming said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, the whole place exploded. Extortion. This was blatant extortion. To think that this puny commander of the law enforcement army would dare to extort a powerful being of the Sky Martial Sword sect. He was truly blinded by greed. The three old men from the Sky Martial Sword sect were seething with anger as their eyes turned red. Even though they had lived for thousands of years, they had never met such a daring person. To think that he would dare to extort them, the Sky Martial Sword sect. Bastard, I'll kill you. The old man who spoke first was enraged. He couldn't bear it any longer, and let out a long roar. A terrifying sword chi condensed and slashed towards Lu Ming. 4th level spirit god. This old man was a 4th level spirit god expert, and his battle prowess was several times stronger than Wuxia. Lu Ming's glabella glowed as a small red pagoda appeared and rapidly expanded. This small pagoda was the Emperor Spirit weapon that Lu Ming had obtained in the Sacred Mansion Mystic Realm. After so many days of refining, Lu Ming had already begun to refine it. The aura of the Emperor Spirit weapon in the small pagoda was also completely restrained. Outsiders could not sense it at all. Lu Ming wanted to take this opportunity to test the power of the small pagoda. After all, there were countless pagoda-shaped spiritual weapons in the world. Lu Ming wasn't afraid of being recognized as long as he withdrew his aura. Lu Ming grabbed the body of the pagoda and smashed it towards the sword light. With a loud boom, the sword light was shattered. Lu Ming's body didn't move at all. The Emperor's spiritual weapon consumes too much true essence. I really can't bring out much of its power. Lu Ming muttered to himself. He had used up a large amount of true essence in the previous attack. Even a martial emperor would be envious of an emperor's spiritual weapon. It was normal that he couldn't bring out its power. As he muttered to himself, he put the small pagoda away. He wasn't satisfied, but the others were already stunned. Lu Ming could actually block the attack of a 4th level spirit god expert. He was too strong. At this moment, Lu Ming was unfathomable in the eyes of the crowd. Every time others thought that he had reached his limit, the strength he displayed would exceed their imagination. You're just a law enforcer. Your treasure is good, but let's see how many of my moves you can take with just your treasure. The elder from the Sky Martial Sword sect shouted angrily. His aura became even more shocking. A sword light shot up 10,000 meters high, and the sword's power was vast and terrifying. If a tiger doesn't show its might, you'll take me for a sick cat. Kill! Lu Ming shouted. A long spear condensed in his hand, and he pierced it towards a Sky Martial Sword sect disciple. Puff! The Sky Martial Sword sect disciple screamed miserably as he was nailed to the ground by Lu Ming. Lu Ming used a thunderous method to tell them not to think that he didn't dare to kill. Give me the origin stone as a ransom, otherwise I'll kill all of you. Lu Ming's voice was very cold. Lu Ming wouldn't miss such a good opportunity to extort a sum of money. Purely absorbing the spirit energy of heaven and earth for cultivation was too slow. After such a long time, Lu Ming's current cultivation level was only at the mid-second level of the spirit god realm. If he could devour a large number of primordial stones, his cultivation level would improve rapidly. However, he lacked resources now. There was still half a month before the million-year national sacrificial ceremony began. The competition set by the Sacred Emperor would also begin. Lu Ming's goal was to get into the top 3. The Sacred Emperor could agree to one condition for the top 3. However, it wasn't that easy to get into the top 3. When Yang Patian and Tuoba Shi were in the Sacred Mansion's secret realm, their cultivation had already reached the peak 2nd level spirit god level. Now that some time had passed, it was very likely that they had made a breakthrough. If a genius like Yang Patian had reached the 3rd level spirit god level, it would be more troublesome for him to defeat him. Moreover, there were 5 such geniuses in the central continent in Nanming. It wouldn't be easy for the geniuses of the Western Desert to get into the top 3. However, if Lu Ming's cultivation also broke through to the 3rd level spirit god level, he would have full confidence. How dare you, bastard, you're courting death. Kill! Lu Ming's killing of a Sky Martial Sword sect disciple completely enraged the 3 elders of the Sky Martial Sword sect. Terrifying auras erupted, and sword chi soared into the sky. Their killing intent was incomparably cold, as if winter had arrived. Especially the auras of the other 2 elders. They were even more terrifying than the one who attacked before. They definitely surpassed the 4th level spirit god level. Such experts wanted to join forces, and their momentum was too shocking. The law enforcement flag, please. Lu Ming suddenly shouted. The law enforcement flag is here. Within the law enforcement hall, Tai Xing rushed out with a large flag. Lu Ming took it and stabbed it into the ground. It was a 10-meter-long flag with a sword and a saber embroidered on it. It was incomparably sharp and looked like a real saber and sword. However, the flag looked very old and was even covered in dust. It was obvious that it hadn't been used for a long time. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.